Okay, so today we're going to be looking at the poem Mother, Any Distance by Simon Armitage. Simon Armitage is currently our Poet Laureate, which means he is officially the nation's poet, and he writes poetry for any important event. Most recently, he's written one about the coronavirus. So to understand this poem, you really need to be thinking about your mother, your relationship with your mother, and what what your mother means to you or has meant to you at different times. So just take a minute to think about this. What do you think your mother meant to you 10 years ago? So maybe that would be when you were 4 or 5. What does she mean now? And what do you think she will mean 10 years in the future? I'm just going to pause to give you time to think. Okay, so 10 years ago, you were 4 or 5. Think about how dependent you were on your mother. You weren't able to do a lot of things that you can do nowadays. You rely on her for love, for warmth, for practical things like food, for getting you to places, to parties, to events, whatever that might be. But you were very, very reliant, and you don't have much independence as a 4 or a 5-year-old. Now move forward to now, you're 14, 15. How has that changed? Well, I suspect Mum still loves you. I certainly hope so. And she does look after you. You might be helping with things now, like you might be helping with the washing, you might be helping with the cooking, or she might be doing still all of those things to you. However, she's probably not ferrying you round in her car or taking you to places nearly as much as she used to do. She doesn't need to stay at the parties you go to. So you're probably more independent now, even though you're still very close to your mum. You're probably much more independent now than you were when you were 4 or 5. Now, how do you think that will change 10 years in the future? When you're 24, 25, do you think you'll still be living at home? Will you be living independently? And how do you think that relationship with your mother will have changed? When you were 4 or 5, she will have been making most of the decisions for you. 10 years in the future, you'll probably be making those decisions for yourself. So thinking about leaving home, what do you think the advantages of leaving home would be? And what the disadvantages? Now, I suspect you're all going, the advantages of leaving home are making your own decisions, going to bed when you want, getting up when you want, eating what you want, making a lot of sound decisions for yourself, being able to decide when you go out, when you stay in, who you'll see, all these sorts of things. However, there can be some disadvantages too, no matter how attractive that sounds. You're going to have to do your own shopping, plan your meals, cook your food, clean your own house, do your own washing, do your own ironing, and all of those practical things that your loving mum probably does for you day in, day out without complaining. So while there are many advantages to leaving home, there are some disadvantages too. So what's happening in our poem? Well, literally, the poetic voice, our speaker, has bought a home. They've bought their first home and they're preparing to move out of the family home. And they're going round to do all the practical things like measuring up windows and floors, for carpets, for curtains, for furniture. And the mother of the poetic voice is helping him measure up his new house. She holds on to one end of the tape measure as he walks away from her to measure the windows, the pelmets, the doors. So she's the fixed point in this. She's the mother who has been the centre of his world, and he is literally walking away from her as they measure up for the new house. He's also taking the time to explore the empty rooms in his new home, which seem vast and big to him. Going right to the top of the house, climbing up a ladder into the loft and opening a window or a skylight and looking outside at the huge vast expanse of sky outside as his mother waits downstairs. Now this is literally what is happening in our poem. However, the poem is also an extended metaphor. They're measuring, and the growing physical distance between them represents the changing relationship with his mother as he prepares to leave home for the first time and step into adulthood. And this can be a difficult time for both parent and child. It's about redefining your relationships. The mother has to let go and let the child leave, as is normal, as is natural, and grow up and become their own person. But that can be very difficult for the parent too. But this is from the child's point of view. Now, at the end of the second stanza, we have two metaphors: anchor, kite. Now, if you think about an anchor, you look at the pictures on this PowerPoint, the anchor is a fixed point. It fixes anything that moves to a point. So for here, for example, we've got a boat. The anchor is the safety that stops the boat from sailing off or sort of floating off or disappearing. It's a fixed point. And the anchor here is the mother. The mother will always be the speaker's mother. They will always be at home. They will always be there for them. Advice, emotional support, practical support. They're not moving. They are staying where they are. So we have the mother as the anchor, which means that the speaker, our poetic voice, is the kite. Why do you think that is? Look at the pictures there. As we fly a kite, to fly a kite, we have to unravel it. Whoever's at the other end, anchoring the kite. In the poem, our mother, they have to be able to let the string out to enable the wind to catch the kite so it can fly high in the sky. And while it's there anchoring the kite so it doesn't fly away to wherever, the kite is dipping and diving in the wind. They can't control the journey that that kite is on. And here we have the kite representing our poetic voice and the adventure into independence that they are about to embark on, knowing that the mother will always be there at home as their anchor should they need them. So let's look at the structure and form of Mother Any Distance. Well, the poem is loosely written in the form of a sonnet, which, as you know, is a traditional love poem, usually to do with romance. And this is about a son's love for his mother, but how that's changed, that the relationship is changing as he gets older and becomes more independent, which is the natural and the normal thing to happen. But unlike a sonnet, the poem has an irregular rhyme scheme, which maybe reveals the poet's feelings of uncertainty towards his mother and uncertainty about the future, whether she's going to be prepared to let go, because it's really hard for a parent to let go too, even though they know it's the most natural thing and the right thing in the world for their children to grow up and to leave home. So we have 3 stanzas. In the first stanza, the poet feels he needs his mother's support in a practical sense and an emotional sense. She's there helping him measure up for the carpets, the curtains, the furniture in his new home, and she's helping him by holding one end of the tape measure while he measures everything up. However, by the second stanza, he's beginning to explore his feelings of independence as he moves away from his mother to explore his new home. He quite significantly leaves her downstairs holding one end of a tape measure while he moves away from her physically and metaphorically. He's becoming more independent as he's beginning to set out on life's adventures on his own. And by the third stanza, the poet realises he must become independent. He knows his mum needs to let go, and he needs to take that step into the unknown, to take the risk of leaving home and everything that will bring with him. And he's unsure what that future looks like. Excitement tinged with anxiety, because he's not sure if he will fall or fly. Mother, any distance greater than a single span requires a second pair of hands. You come to help me measure windows, pelmets, doors, the acres of the walls, the prairies of the floors. It's significant that the poem begins with the title, Mother, Any Distance. Using the word mother rather than mum or ma or whatever you call your mum has a sense of formality. It's a personal address, and the speaker, our poetic voice, is clearly addressing this poem, dedicating this poem to his mother. You've then got a comma after mother. A little bit of caesura there just creates a little bit of distance, mother. Any distance greater than a single span. Now a span is when you hold your arms out as wide as they can go. That's about as far as you can measure on your own. But if you've got a distance greater, so if you're measuring curtains or floorboards for carpets, you can't measure that on your own because it's larger than a single span when you've got your arms outstretched. So it requires a second pair of hands. And of course that second pair of hands, who is his mother, who has always been there to help him since the moment he was born. You come to help me measure windows, pelmets, doors. Okay, now if you're not sure what a pelmet is, if you look at the picture of the curtains and you see sort of like the strip of fabric across the top of the curtains, that is a pelmet. And anyway, Mum has come to help him do all the practical things he needs to do to order curtains, to work out where furniture's going, to order the right size carpets. But then look at the change in the fourth line. The acres of the walls, the prairies of the floors. Now, an acre is a very large piece of land, as is a prairie. Prairies tend to be sort of, I don't know, out in the Midwest, where if you watch a cowboy movie, they tend to live on prairies, huge, vast areas of land. Well, of course, his rooms and his walls can't be measured in terms of acres. Can't be seen as prairies in terms of actual size. So these are metaphors for how big his rooms seem to be, how big the floors seem to be. And it's also hyperbole. Acres of walls, prairies of floors. He's exaggerating how big they look. But of course, a house with no furniture in can look vast, and it needs to be filled. So let's look at stanza 2. You at the 0 end, me with the spool of tape, recording length, reporting meters, centimetres back to base, then leaving up the stairs. The line still feeding out, unreeling, years between us. Anchor, kite. So the mum has the beginning of the tape measure, the zero end, where the measuring begins. He's got the spool of tape, so the biggest part of the tape measure, in his hands, and he's moving it sort of across the floors, sort of up windows, whatever that is, and he's telling his mum to write down, you know, how many meters, how many centimeters, this measures, all that measures, and he's reporting it back to base. The mother is the base. She is the person who's the anchor in his life, and he will always go back to. And then he leaves up the stairs. Rather than walking up the stairs, he's leaving. So he's moving away from his mother physically and metaphorically. And the line is still feeding out. The tape measure is still stretching between them, but it's stretching over greater and greater distance. It's unreeling the years between us. So this tape measure metaphorically represents the same relationship, the relationship they've had over the years, the sense of this shared history. And equally, it can also be seen as the umbilical cord. Remember, when you were born, you were attached to your mother by an umbilical cord. As you have been growing in her womb, through the umbilical cord, she has been feeding you, helping you grow until you are ready to be born. And then once you're born, that first connection is cut. And we finish off this stanza with the two metaphors we discussed earlier. Anchor, kite. She's at the base, the anchor. Okay, she's always there. He knows she's there. She's sort of the rock that he can always come back to, the steady point. And he's very sure of this, and he's very certain of this. While he is the kite, he's going off to explore the new opportunities that having his own home and independence will bring him. And now the third and the final stanza. I spacewalk through the empty bedrooms, climb the ladder to the loft, to breaking point where something has to give. 2 floors below, your fingertips still pinch the last 1/100th of an inch. I reach towards a hatch that opens on an endless sky, to fall or fly. So in this third and final stanza, there's a real sense of excitement and a real sense of independence and looking forward to the unknown that's ahead of him. I spacewalk. You've got this metaphor here reflecting how he feels being on his own is an exciting adventure. It's also a bit scary, but it's a new experience for him, and he's really enjoying literally exploring the empty rooms of his new house, but also the exciting adventures and the independence that lies ahead of him. He climbs the ladder to the loft. So remember, his mum is on the ground floor with the zero end of the tape measure, and he's going as high up in the house as he possibly can. Far at the furthest point he can go away physically from his mother. And he gets to breaking point. So that's the point where the tape measure has fully unravelled. It cannot unravel any further unless it breaks. And something has to give. So we know that he needs his mum to let go. But this can be a really difficult moment for a parent. It's really exciting to see your child grow up to adulthood, 18, 19, whatever that is, And my two children have gone off to university, and it's really exciting. They're going off, they're experiencing new things, they're getting new independence, but it can be really difficult. It's so different at home without them. It can be a little bit difficult letting go, even though you know it's the right thing and it's natural. So she is 2 floors below him, so there's a physical distance between them, and he now wants a bit more of emotional distance, okay, and a symbolic or metaphoric distance between them. And her fingertips still pinching. It feels like she's really holding on, desperately holding on. She doesn't want to let him go. But if she doesn't let him go, this will hurt. And she's hanging on to that last little bit, that last moment before he goes, that last 1/100th of an inch. And then we have the ellipsis, 3 little dots there between inch and eye reach. We've moved from the mother holding on. He's turned his back on her. He's reaching, so he's stretching out, he's stretching away towards a hatch. And when we're talking about a hatch, we are talking about the skylight in the roof. He's reaching towards the hatch that opens on an endless sky. So he's literally opening the skylight and he's looking out at the vast sky ahead of him. All he can see is sky all around him. It seems to be endless, to fall or fly. So the endless sky suggests there's no limit to the opportunities open to him. They can't be measured like the walls. He's very optimistic. He's very excited. And we have this bird-like imagery. When you leave home, it's called flying the nest. Your mother is at the centre of that nest. So traditionally, mum is at the centre of that nest, the homemaker, that makes sure you're okay. And then when you leave home, you fly the nest. And a hatch, of course, not just a skylight. Birds hatch, don't they? They hatch from their eggs. And once in a nest, in a bird's nest, they've hatched and they've grown up enough, they fly off as well and leave their mother. So that's really optimistic. That's hopeful. And then we finish on that final line, to fall or fly. We've got this bird imagery. When you fly the nest, your mother doesn't know, you don't know whether you're going to fall, whether you're going to manage to fly, or whether you're going to fly off to experience the endless opportunities. It's about taking risks in life, stepping into the unknown. He doesn't know if he'll be able to do this without the security that his mother provides. But it's time for him to be independent, and it's time to take a risk, and it is time to go. So thematically, the relationship we are looking at here is parent-child. Specifically in this poem, it's mother-son, but it could also be parent-child. So we're looking thematically at family relationships and how that change as the child gets older. We're looking at their sense of independence as the child becomes an adult and steps out into the wider world. It can be a very scary thing, it can be a very exciting thing. So we're talking about the possibilities of getting older and what that might bring. We're also looking at the love of a mother and the security that that can bring to us. So even though you are an adult, if you are fortunate enough to have your mother or your father at home, still available to talk to, okay, to sound out with problems, with issues, to share good news, to share bad news, they're still important family bonds, family ties. You still have that connection, even though you've grown up and you have left home.